We've noticed a real increase in the number of care homes that have started using Soldo recently, and we can't imagine how difficult it must be at the moment. So what we have tried to do is put together some content that could be useful and at least ease some of the burdens that care homes are facing at the moment. So the first thing we tried to do was try to understand why it is that care homes are suddenly being attracted to Soldo and what exactly it is that we're solving for them. Now, of course, a lot of key workers are still travelling around, so the more traditional use of Soldo is still really relevant for those sorts of people. They still need to fill their car up with fuel, and maybe still need to pay for incidental things while they're out and about. So giving people a Soldo card to use in that way is definitely helpful. The next area that we've seen is that in some care homes there can be quite a high turnover of staff, and because you've got people that need to go out and incur expenses on behalf of the organisation, what we're seeing care homes doing is providing those new starters with a Soldo card with a set balance on it and certain restrictions around spending so that they can freely share funds with those people and let them do their jobs without feeling like they're risking money or exposing themselves to people they don't particularly know too well. And the third is around the use of cash. What we're hearing from the care homes that we've spoken to is that very often a manager will go to an ATM, draw out however much money they need, and then go and physically distribute that to homes within their organisation. And that brings with it a ton of problems, particularly at the moment. So you've got the admin burden of doing that, and the admin burden of managing petty cash anyway is not really where the carers that we've spoken to want to spend their time. Obviously, they want to be looking after their residents and making sure they're safe. So doing petty cash reconciliations, things like that, is just not a great use of time for them. But clearly having a manager going around physically to different residences and delivering cash is a big risk at the moment in terms of the movement of people and the risks around the virus. So we're having a situation where care homes are really kind of tying themselves in knots to get cash distributed and shared around the different residences, and then even cash itself, once they've got it, is difficult or more tricky to use anyway. And so we're seeing people giving each home or each residence a card that they can then top up remotely, and then whatever they need they can go and get much more easily, and then of course get back to their job of looking after their residents. So what we're going to do in a second is spin into the product. And for those of you that are already using Soldo, we can show you how to set this up to get these benefits. If you're not already using it for those purposes and it would help, we can show you how to set Soldo up so that you can achieve those things and hopefully make that a bit quicker for you. We've also got some expert advice lined up as well that's not to do with Soldo, but just general advice around what care homes can be doing at the moment to protect themselves, protect their residents, and really just try and navigate through a very, very difficult time. So we've talked about a couple of ways that Soldo can help. Let's go and have a look at what that looks like in the product. If you've got key workers that might be out and about still and incurring expenses as they're travelling around, one of the areas that they'll be using the solution most will be within the mobile app. And there'll be some common questions that they might have for you, such as what can I spend, what limits have I got, that they can actually answer themselves within the app rather than needing to come back to you. So I just want to show you very quickly where they can find those things so that they don't need to spend their time and yours by coming and asking those questions. So when we first go into the app, as you can see on the screen here, I can see the cards that I've got available, so I can swipe between them. And then just on this dashboard here, I can see what the settings are. So I can see if the card is locked or not. I can see if I can use it online. I can see if it can be used at a cash point. I can even look at my budget controls and see what limits I've got over given time periods. Also, I can look within the spend categories area, and here it will tell me if I'm restricted on any types of expenses. So it might well be that we've turned off food shopping, for example. We may have turned off transport. And then here I can see within the app what I can and can't use the card for. Now ordinarily you could come into activity and see some of your recent transactions. Now of course I'm not travelling around, so I don't have a huge amount in here. So what I'm going to come and do is click on the menu and go to transactions, and there we'll see the most recent transactions that I had when I was still able to move around. Interestingly, we'll see then the list that we've got. There are a few icons on here that help us understand what's going on with these transactions. So a paperclip means that there's an attachment with the item. So I've taken the photograph and added the receipt. And the little tag icon means that I've filled in the notes that I need to be doing as per my expenses policy. So as a user, I can see the list of items that I've spent. I can see what I still need to attach receipts for very quickly and easily by just scrolling down the list here. And those of you in the finance teams will be spending more of your time inside the web app. So let's have a look at what we can get from here and a few tips that might be useful to you. So the default screen is the dashboard, and on here you can see A little bit of information about what money you've got available and what each of the balances are for each of the people that have been issued with cards. If we want to go and get some information about what a particular user's been spending or get some insights on that, we come to reports and then statements. And we can either run this for a group or for one individual. So I'm just going to run this for me and I'm going to click see transactions. And just like we saw in the app a moment ago, we've got the paperclip icon that tells us which of these transactions have got receipts or images attached, and we've also got the notes section on the right here so we can see what has been updated. And as you can see, I've not been a very good employee here in terms of keeping this up to date. This is a fairly common problem and we have a nice way of dealing with this. So if we come into configure and then reminders, we can set a rule whereby Soldo will remind each of the staff members if they've not fully completed all of the information that they need to. What we're saying on here, for example, is that for every transaction a user needs to upload an attachment. And we could go a little bit further than that and say actually we also want them to add a note. And then if a user hasn't completed all of these, they'll get a reminder email. We mentioned that there might be scenarios where you've got either new staff or temporary staff that need to incur expenses on behalf of the organisation. But being new and being unfamiliar, you may not be comfortable giving them the company credit card or a large stack of cash to go and spend. So the solution is to give them their own individual card with set limits and certain restrictions and rules in place. And I'm going to show you how to set up the rules for a user just now. So we're going to go into configure and then we're going to go to users. And we're going to come down and pick the user, go to wallets and cards, and I'm going to go and pick the card that I want to add some rules to. We can see that we've got some options. So do I want this card to be used online or only in person? I can choose on or off there. I can choose whether it can be used via contactless payment. I can choose whether it can be used at a cash point, and if so, I can set limits for those amounts as well. I can also choose which types of expenses can be put through the card as well. These are powered by MasterCard's merchant codes, and we might decide that actually certain staff, we don't want them to go and book hotels, we don't want them to go and buy timeshares certainly, and so we can turn these off and have a greater amount of control over what the card can be used for. Of course I can control how much money is on the card, but beyond that I can also control how much can be spent through it as well. So I might decide that we want a maximum budget for the entire month of £1,000. I could decide that I want a weekly budget of no more than 300 and maybe a daily budget of no more than £100. I could set a max per transaction, so I might decide that if I've given somebody a card to go and buy tea bags, they're probably not going to need to go and spend more than 25 quid in one go. Many of the rules and settings that we've just looked at will be relevant for new employees, but they'll also be relevant if you wanted to use a Soldo card in place of your petty cash tin. One setting that's particularly useful is the auto lock after one transaction setting just here. And what this means is that after the card's been used once, it will lock. So if you wanted to give somebody a card to go and buy one particular thing, you could use this setting to make sure that it can't be used after that's been done until they've got back and you've turned the settings back again. What we can also do from a petty cash replacement perspective is look at how we manage a float within a card on Soldo. And to do that, we're going to look at the automatic transfer section just here. Now, I've got a few options here. All of them are switched off at the moment, but I'm going to turn on an option here to set the balance to £350 when it is lower than, say, 75. What this means is when the card gets down to £75, Soldo will top it back up from your main company wallet back up to 350 again. We can put a limit on the total number of transfers, so we might cap the whole thing at £1,000 for the month. What I could do instead of moving the money over when the balance gets low is to set up a periodic transfer. So we might say every month on the 1st I want you to send over another £350 or set the balance to 350. So that removes the admin of trying to distribute money either to wallets for people or to individual residences or homes from the central office. I hope the features and tips that we've just looked at can help you get the most out of using Soldo. Unfortunately, there's only so far a software product like Soldo can go in solving some of those challenges, and so beyond the features that we've looked at, we've also teamed up with a number of experts in the care home sector to try and deliver the best advice that we possibly can to also try and help in other ways in getting through the current crisis. I'm very grateful to have been joined by Michelle Ferris and Jake Standing. Michelle is the head of charities and care at Albert Goodman, and Jake is a business advisory partner at Creston Reeves with a specialism in healthcare. I caught up with them recently and they had some great advice to share. So here's what they had to say.
So I'm Jake Standing. I'm a partner at Creston Reeves, which is a business advisory firm specialising in healthcare and digital transformation. So there's plenty of support available from the government for care homes. What business owners or owners of organisations should do is remind themselves of the information on the government website. But a couple of things that may be particularly important are the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, which is a government-backed loan scheme if your organisation is running into cash flow difficulties. Of course, people who are paying for residents within care homes may be under financial strain themselves, which could lead to some late payments, and it's very important to keep on top of the cash flow there. The interruption loan scheme can help bridge that gap in the short term. There's also government support for statutory sick pay, as well as deferring taxes such as employment taxes that you may wish to follow up on the HMRC helpline. The finance teams within care homes should be looking at KPIs such as cash collection, occupancy rates, and also staff sickness. So clearly there'll be a disruption to service if there are too many people off sick, but considering the current crisis, that may be unavoidable. The cash collection is actually really important because although you wish to be sympathetic to residents and the families of residents, you still need to collect the cash in order to pay your staff. This is where you could have the most automated system in the world chasing all of your debt, but this is where the human element really shines through, and you need to be compassionate with your debtors. So as soon as this all hit, from an audit perspective, we talked about what sectors have specific audit risks surrounding it, and healthcare was one of those sectors that we obviously we covered. And really it's around, if you have an outbreak in a care home, one, they're going to be off sick or self-isolating, but two, it brings into question how well the care home is protecting their staff and residents. So potentially you won't get that occupancy rate coming through after. So really the main focus is to make sure that the care homes are not skimping on PPE. Now it's probably that they're not skimping on PPE, but they are finding it tough to get it. So in terms of trying to get PPE and maybe being unsuccessful, it's very critical that the team log every request for PPE and really document how their supply chain has been affected from COVID-19. We have seen appeals from care homes and hospices where they're able to go out to businesses that have shut that do use face masks generally, such as dentists, and the community have been kind enough to donate into care homes and hospices in that way. So it's all about being flexible and trying to find different avenues to get the PPE. So the key questions that the care home finance team and business owners should be asking their advisors is really around the government support and how they are able, and the mechanics around how they go about getting that support. Now, a lot of the support at the time of this video is not, all of the mechanics is not available, but your advisor should be keeping you up to date as soon as new information becomes live. Of course, you also would like to keep up to date with issues as they go live, and you should track the government website for further information. So through all of this crisis and the conditions that we find ourselves in, it's really important that care homes and their owners continue to find ways to be creative. This isn't just about the finances of an organisation or not being able to get PPE, although of course these are very important topics. The residents may not have people coming in that they're used to. You might have had to stop visitors coming in, entertainment coming in. And so this is where connecting with your business community will allow you to find things such as, VR, virtual reality headsets that may transport your residents to another place where times were better. And it's really, and like I said, it's just really being creative, and the business community are really helpful with that. If you'd like to get in touch, then please feel free to inquire through our website or through my email address.
Well, the hardest part at the moment is it's really highlighting what a fantastic job care homes do, but they do this all the time. This is nothing unusual. And the one thing that really strikes me is they're finally getting the recognition that they deserve. But actually, you know, the government response in terms of funding has been very focused on business. And it does apply to care homes, but we've yet to really see any kind of raft of financial measures, which is probably where they need assistance right now, particularly the smaller care homes that operate, you know, with perhaps 1 or 2 homes. That's really where they need the assistance. But it is tough. It's tough for a lot of care homes, you know, and emotionally as well. I'm speaking to a lot of owners that are, you know, really dragged down by the emotional toll of what's going on at the moment.
What resources, if any, are there available for care homes from the government at the moment?
Well, really, we're looking at the government measures that have been announced for businesses generally. So the coronavirus job retention scheme is largely irrelevant for most of the care homes I've spoken to, because right now they don't want to be furloughing staff. They're struggling to get the staff in the first place. The VAT deferral, again, isn't relevant for most care homes because they're not VAT registered. You have got the time to pay arrangements. So if you've got PAYE or you've got corporation tax to pay, you can phone up and defer them, but that is only a deferral. And so ultimately, the major measure that care homes can look to use is the coronavirus business interruption scheme, which is the loan scheme announced for smaller businesses. And I see some care homes that are very much in the mood of actually, yes, we're going to go down this route. And others are very much saying, well, you know what, I don't want to take this extra burden of loan on. Ultimately, it's a loan. We're going to have to repay it. And it is a bit of a, you know, a choice really as to whether or not that people want to take on this type of debt at the moment. But it is primarily the only measure that's available. I mean, you know, you'll have seen things out and about. There's been a lot of sort of changes to the loan scheme, but it has fairly well settled now. And so just the real basics is that it's open initially for 6 months. For any business with income of up to 45 million, although this morning they have announced a larger loan scheme that's opening on Monday for businesses above 45 million. Not that I think was hugely relevant for a lot of care home owners other than the big guys. And so, you know, it's interest free for the first 12 months, the government paying the interest, and you can borrow any amount up to 5 million, repayable up to 6 years is what they're saying. But again, it's just making sure whether or not you want to take that debt on. And actually, a lot of it is having the information available to allow lenders to give you the money. Because what the government is saying is you have to have had a viable business proposition prior to coronavirus. And whilst care homes quite clearly did, a lot of care homes that I'm talking to just don't have the information there or the ability to pull together the information that the lenders need. And that's, you know, that's not easy. And that's where I'm coming in a lot of cases. Because you need to be able to go to your lender and say, listen, these are our budgets. This is what we were going to do. And most care homes have that. You know, most are pretty on top of that. But actually quantifying what the impact has been on your business and what it could be in the worst case scenario is one of the hardest things out of this.
Where do they start to quantify and get this information from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you really have to look back over your history because they are looking for proof that you have a viable business model. So look back over your history, look at some of your major sort of indicators that you want to be thinking about, occupancy, things like that, and sort of draw out your history in terms of statutory accounts, if you've got them, or management accounts. And then really it's a case of kind of taking a number of scenarios. So actually, whilst no one wants to think worst case, what happened if the home had to completely shut to new entrants and, you know, unfortunately you lost a number of your residents, what would be the position then? What would be the position, which I think most people think might be the case, where you might end up losing maybe 25% of your residents and perhaps not able to fill those beds?
Yeah.
Where does that leave you? And think about costs. You know, the hidden cost in this to care homes really is not just patching it with their residents, which is, you know, hopefully unlikely, but completely possible, but actually the impact on their staff. Because if you have staff that are having to self-isolate, are you able to get access to staff? And if you are, you're having to pay agencies really over the odds. And that's where I think the key financial pressure could come for a lot of care homes, is actually access to staff and how much they're having to pay to get access to the right staff.
Sure, and we're seeing that in a number of areas, right? So you've just mentioned there the elevated cost of staff, but there's also stories in the news about care homes having to pay elevated prices for PPE because of the shortage of that sort of stuff.
And food.
Yeah.
I'm seeing various local stories about care homes being unable to access food because supermarkets are putting limits on how much they can buy. And so they're having to go through different routes that are costing them a lot more. So there are elevated costs right across the sector.
What can care homes be doing to try and get greater control over their costs and their cash flow?
The first thing to do is to know what it is. So, it sounds a given, but a lot of care homes wouldn't have necessarily a daily or weekly cash flow because simply they just don't need to. So pull that together first, work out where your real peaks and troughs are in the month. It's quite possible that actually you could perhaps shift some of your staff to being paid in a different manner. So if they're paid weekly, but actually that's causing you a cash flow issue, could you look to pay them monthly instead? Could you do things like that? Could you potentially take repayment holidays on any existing loans you've got? Could you work out if perhaps you've got losses for the last couple of years? Something as straightforward as filing your accounts early could generate a tax repayment. It's little things like that. It's knowing where you are and trying to squeeze everything out of the position that you're currently in before you want to go taking on the debt, which is what I'm hearing from a lot of local providers.
What sort of tools or resources are available to make this process easier?
So the first thing to say is that most accountants should have a basic cash flow template that they can let you have. Whether and if you don't want to incur costs from your accountants to do it, then absolutely fine. We're understanding that and we're trying to support our clients. So we have a really basic Excel cash flow template that we can let our clients have if they want to put all the information in themselves. And you would think that most accountants should have that. Obviously, online software is a massive benefit at the moment. We have a number of care homes that use online software for their accounting. And so that's a massive help because that enables us to hop in, see exactly what they're seeing and perhaps give them some assistance around the edges. And I think that's really something that will come out of this, is that people will actually make that move towards cloud because they'll appreciate how much of a difference it makes.
Yeah.
Having said that, now probably isn't the time to up your accounting package and put it into a cloud accounting package.
Yeah.
But it is about having that visibility and making sure that someone in your organisation, and it might be that you have to reach out to your accountants for support, but they should be able to provide you with that. Because ultimately, we're here to make sure that you can keep going. That's our job.
Yeah. And, a lot of these bits of advice that you mentioned here are great bits of advice in crisis time, but clearly it's good advice for peacetime, I guess, as well. And in the normal run of business, having a handle on these things is good practice anyway, right?
Absolutely. And you'd be amazed with care homes in particular. People are so fantastic at what they do. And 9 times out of 10, when they're driven to open a care home or run a care home, it's not because they want to worry about the money. It's because of what they want to do with it. And so actually, it's not a natural skill that comes to a lot of people, but it is something that people can really make quite significant savings on all the time. As you say, it doesn't need to be a wartime provision. It could be something that a lot of people are doing all the time.
What sort of KPIs and metrics and other things could care homes be looking at to give themselves an indication of what's coming forward or coming ahead of time for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the key KPIs don't really change. As you say, it's the type of thing that people should be looking at outside of this scenario. But if it's not something that you're already looking at, occupancy is probably key. You probably know your occupancy and you know what it's been over the last 6 months, but do you know where you want it to be and where it's going to be? And they're actually both quite key metrics. Where you want it to be is quite important. And I speak to a number of care homeowners that don't actually know what their break-even occupancy is.
Right.
Based on the cost that they have, what do they need their occupancy to be? And actually that might look quite different at the moment if you consider different sources of funding. And I think going forward, it's going to look different as well. Because actually, not only do care homes have the immediate crisis that's going on right now that they have to firefight, I can conceivably see an issue in 2, 3, 5 years' time where residents that perhaps were paying with their pensions that might be rapidly decreasing or hit by this, where residents have third-party top-ups or family are paying for fees. And actually, if their family are going through a tough time at the moment, it might have to be one of those considerations that comes into play in 2 or 3 years' time about what level of funds they can afford. And so I think, we're talking a little bit about metrics, but I think one of the best things that care homes could look to do now, or certainly once they're out of firefighting, is to sit down and have this honest assessment with their residents and with their residents' families And actually, you know, we do quite a lot of financial planning at Albert Goodman, and we talk quite a lot to people about this. And it's surprising how few care home owners are willing to have that chat to residents when they come in. And say, listen, let's be honest now, what funding do you have? How long is it likely to last? Can you see a strain on it? Can we do anything to help you with that? And in some ways, it just makes the residents' life a lot easier. Because actually, if their daughter is good enough to say, you know what, Mum, we've got this money for you, but it does mean that you're going to have to make a choice in 6 years' time about whether or not you can afford this level of care that you're currently having, it might help the decision. It helps the resident. It helps the care home owner. It helps everyone, really. It's a really hard discussion to have. You know, as British people, we're adverse to talking about money. It just, you know, it doesn't happen. But it is really important. And I would say, I think more so over the coming years, that's going to be something that really, I think a lot of care home owners should be thinking about.
And you mentioned right sort of emotional impact on people, and clearly getting down and this, the sort of human side of these business relationships is growing in importance. It was already important before, but it's so crucial now. And like you've mentioned there, having those conversations about costs. But what are the conversations do you think care home owners could be having with their residents at the moment, given and their staff as well, given the sort of emotional strain at the moment?
Well, it's just about making sure really that people know what resources are out there and available. So, you know, Mind have done a massive plug of their services that they're currently running 24-hour phone line help and support and that type of thing. And it is, you know, I think everyone is feeling the impact on their staff at the moment. You know, everyone is conscious of what this is doing, and we're not at the front line. You know, I worry about my staff sitting in front of a computer at home for 12 hours a day. But they're not going through anywhere near the horrors that the majority of people in care homes, and the fear as well. You know, my sister works in a care home, and so she sent me a message yesterday of herself with a mask on, full surgical gown, talking to residents, and she just said it's so hard to get across to residents how you feel when you're covered in PPE. They can't see your smile. They can't get the emotion in your face, and that, you know, that's so important, as you say. So actually, I think, you know, checking in with staff very regularly, and checking in with your residents, you know, to make sure they understand the reasoning behind what it is that you're doing, the steps that you're taking. Opening and transparency with them is really key. You know, I know a lot of people say, well, actually, you know, we've got dementia patients, you can't lock them in their rooms. And no, you can't. And you might have to explain something to them 10 times, and it might make them slightly more anxious at first, but it's about knowing your residents and knowing what their response is going to be. And as you say, it all comes down to personal interaction at the end of the day.
And with that, you've mentioned the PPE and how difficult it can be to engage with that on. And there's been some great stories of people creating or inventing masks with little kind of cutout bits or kind of see-through bits on the face so you can see the smile. We've seen stories of schools creating masks and people 3D printing stuff. For other businesses that might be watching, what could other organisations be doing that would be helpful or could contribute in some way to the crisis and the struggle that care homes are going through?
Well, clearly, you know, most businesses can't convert to making PPE that hit the required standards, and that's the big issue we're having at the moment. Is that whilst all these companies have offered to make PPE, you know, I know Burberry have offered this type of thing, it's getting through the required standards. But it's about just bringing a human touch. You know, it's about putting, you know, I've seen pictures of people putting photographs of themselves as children on the front of their gowns, so that, you know, people have something to interact with. And I think if you can bring that human touch in any respect, whether that's, you know, donating, you know, perhaps food, or standing outside a window and waving to people, or just creating that human element of touch, that's really what's hopefully going to come out of this a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it's dark times, I guess, in many respects at the moment. But if there are hopes that we can have of a better world, I guess, coming in through that, it will be that human connection, the kind of consideration for the people that we're seeing. And if there's someone watching here that's at a care home that, you know, for whatever reason their accountant hasn't been in touch, hasn't been able to reach out to them, what are the key questions that you would say that a care homeowner should be asking their accountant or their advisors?
Well, first of all, they need to understand the business. So the accountant needs to understand the business that this person is running, because the problem is that every single care home is different. And that is one of the issues that we're seeing, both in terms of government measures and the way that people respond. You know, you have people that run them in partnerships, people that run them as sole traders, people that run them as companies. You have huge ranges of the level of fees that are paid, depending on what sector it is that you're going at, whether you get a lot of government support, whether a lot of your residents are private payers. And so first of all, your accountant really needs to understand that model. And so what they need to be saying to them is, listen, how does what's happened impact the way that we run our care home? Because I can talk a lot about generic business advice, but it is very specific to how it is that individual runs their care home. What measures are there out there that could help me, and how can you assist me with that? Can you provide me with a tool to better understand my outgoings? Can you provide me with some kind of software that you can access and look into this if it's not my strong point? It's about just reaching out. And sometimes I would say, as accountants, we're not renowned for being the most proactive. But I would have hoped that the majority of accountants would have been in contact with their clients by now, even if it's, listen, do you need anything? And if you do need anything, you know where I am. But don't be afraid to reach back the other way. People think, oh, they're my accountant. I only see them once a year. I don't want to have that engagement. If you want to do that, do it. If you need the help now, reach out to them. Because even if they can't help, there'll be someone that will. Everyone is going through a real crisis time at the moment. People are piling on and doing what they can to help. There are certain things that you just need to be aware of to make sure in the background that don't go wrong. So the CQC has stopped their routine appointments, but they will come back and they will be ensuring that care was delivered properly throughout this time. Not only making sure your safeguarding policies are still intact, looking at things around how you handle people, around your IT controls, around segregation of duties, both in terms of care and in terms of your finances, to make sure that actually you're not just firefighting, that there is still some consideration that things are being done properly in the way they should be. And one example is we're seeing a huge rise, which is a horrible scenario. We're seeing a huge rise in the number of fraud attacks on care homes and charities over the last couple of weeks, where people are sending emails requesting payment and thinking that because they're so busy, they'll just go ahead and make the payments to an account they don't recognise. And so it's really horrible to have to say, but do remain vigilant for these type of things. Do make sure that you're following all of your guidance and that you're not cutting corners to get to where you need to be.
And again, presumably, their accountants, advisors could assist on some good quality controls to make sure that only legitimate invoices are being marked for payment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really key to, again, it's another case of these controls probably should have always been in place, but certainly it's something that they could look at now. It's something that very easily people can look at remotely, can have a look at how it works for your organisation and saying, actually, do you need to change this? And if you do, let's make it practical. Let's make it something that works for you, but doesn't expose you to more risk in the process.
If anybody wants to reach out to you or get in touch, what is the best way for them to contact you?
So at Abbott Goodman, we remain open virtually. We're working in bedrooms or wherever it is. So we've got a live chat on our website. You can get all of my contact details on there. I'm our head of care. Anything, or just pick up the phone and ring our main office, and it will get put through to me. So, yeah, and what I should say is we're all here to help out at the moment. We're all helping clients, but you don't have to be a client. If you've got a question, pick up the phone, because if I can answer it in 10 minutes free, I'd much rather do that, and you know the answer.
Thanks again to Michelle and Jake for their input. To learn more about Soldo, speak to your accountant, visit us at soldo.com, or feel free to email me at lstallard@soldo.com, or get in touch with me on LinkedIn.